Hello, hello. Good evening. Hopefully, I will see a few of you showing up, joining us soon. And please do post a comment in the chat to let us know who you are and where you are. And welcome to this August broadcast. Pretty Lunacy season broadcast from School of Celebrancy. And tonight I am joined by the very lovely Eimear Burke, who's just back from a camp. Hello, Kai in Lübeck in Germany. Hello, all of you, wherever you are. Please do post and say hello and where you're joining us from. And I think Eimear probably needs little introduction to most of you, but I'm just going to welcome her into the studio now. Hello, Eimear.
Hi, River. Hi, everybody, and lovely to be here.
I am here in Brighton, where it's been a slightly drizzly day, but the sun is coming out this evening. And where are you, Eimear, and how is it where you are?
And this is rare, but it was 26 degrees today. It was cloudy, and now it's sunny, so it's been kind of muggy.
Yeah.
And I'm always grateful for any kind of warm weather that we do have here in Ireland. So we've had bits of rain, so it's nice to have the warmth.
Hello, Pauline in Somerset, Julie and Guy in North Dorset, Eve in Cornwall, Linda in Ayrshire. Great to see you all. So, Eimear, you're just back from a camp.
Yeah, it was an Earth Song camp, which I think happens in Ireland every year. In an undisclosed location. It's, a field of 600 people where we're in circles of maybe between 15 and 20 people cooking over an open fire and being totally unplugged, making our own music and like drug and alcohol free. And there's all sorts of workshops and singing and chanting and drumming and dancing and all of that kind of thing. And sitting around a fire yakking, which I really, really enjoy.
Oh, how wonderful. That sounds absolutely blissful, actually.
Yeah, because there's no phones, no nothing. You're only allowed to use your phone in the car park. So
fantastic. Yeah, I think it's been a little while since I've had something like that. So I didn't say much about you before bringing you on stream, but I think probably everyone joining us knows that you are the chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And you're also a psychologist and a storyteller and also a celebrant. And I'm very proud to say that you were one of the first graduates of School of Celebrancy, in fact.
That's right, for the funeral rites.
Yeah, and I think that was back in 2015 or 2016 that you did that course.
The autumn of 2015 was the autumn after Howard died. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was our pilot run of the course when we first set up School of Celebrancy. With the aim of supporting people with initially our courses were just for people within the order and to support people with serving their wider communities as celebrants. So could you give us a quick overview, a very brief overview of what you've been up to kind of celebrant wise in that intervening 6 or 7 years, Eimear?
I started doing weddings and hand fastings long time ago, and I had been doing them. And then it was in September of 2014, this is where you and I met, was at Earth Spirit. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Philip and Stephanie organized, it was a meeting of people, it wasn't a training course, but it was around people interested in celebrancy. So we had Kathleen Matthews and you, we even had a couple from Mexico. Do you remember we did a hand fasting for them? And then your one started on the funeral rites. And I remember it's interesting when we see how technology has advanced in the intervening years. My internet was so bad. I kept falling out and saying, can I come back in? Please don't make me beg. Constantly in and out. And it's like now it's everything seems to be much more seamless. So I'm yes, I became a legal celebrant, solemnizer of pagan weddings in 2014. and it was in, I think, was it? Yes, it was in. It was a few years that the Pagan Federation managed to get pagan solemnizers recognized in Ireland in 2009. I don't think you have it in the UK yet, do you?
We don't know.
So it's really interesting that Ireland is ahead in some things. I know you do in Scotland, and so I started then. I mean, I was also doing I'm not illegal ones, but non-legal ones, and I still do non-legal weddings. So I can do non-legal weddings here and in my grove here in Kilkenny. Otherwise, if it's legal, it has to be done in a public place, because all legal weddings are public.
Yeah.
Have to be open to the public. So I've been doing that and some baby namings, but it's mostly the hand fastings. I mean, I'm not full time because I do all sorts of other things, but
Yeah.
it's something I absolutely love to do. I love doing weddings. This sounds really silly, but I'm a hopeless romantic. When I watch what couples, how they are together and their vows, and when they write their own vows and speak to each other, and when they're gripped with emotion, and then I am as well, I just find that so magical. It's such a privilege just to witness that.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I just want to say hello to Shannon, who's sending me a big hug. Shannon, aka Stefano in Italy.
Hi, ciao Stefano, come stai? Conosco, I know. Oh no, maybe it's a different Stefano. Sorry if it isn't. I know.
Yeah, and yes, I couldn't agree more about the how amazingly the technology has come along, because it was incredibly clunky when we first started out, wasn't it? And yeah, it's interesting that you started talking about the fact that you can now legally solemnize weddings, because this is obviously a hot topic here in the UK at the moment, where a lot of celebrants have been pushing. Of course, the situation is different in Scotland, but in England and Wales, a lot of celebrants have been pushing to be able to conduct legal weddings. And I have to admit, for myself personally, I'm quite happy for things to remain as they are, because I relish the freedom from having any kind of legal duties or responsibilities and any attendant kind of restrictions that there might be, or so that what we're able to offer at the moment is total freedom of choice of venue and time, and also content of ceremony. So I just wonder how you have found that
There's
before and
no
after.
difference in terms of my ceremony, in terms of content. All I have to do is ask 2 legal questions. There's no restrictions or constraints, which is, I mean, I always ask, do you come of your own free will? That's not necessarily, I don't think there's 2 questions. Do you promise to take this person as your lawfully wedded spouse? Yeah. And do you know of any impediments to this union? They're the only 2 questions. So there's no difference for me in terms of the ceremony I will do. I will just weave those 2 questions in.
Great. I mean, that's great to hear that it's like that in Ireland. I guess my sort of slight twitchiness is that it might not end up being like that in England, because at the moment there are quite a lot of or there seem to be, quite a lot of restrictions about, at the moment in a civil ceremony, people aren't allowed to have a prayer or
yeah, but that's in a civil ceremony. You see, it's the same in Ireland. You can't, at a civil ceremony, you cannot have any religious icon. So I know people who say wanted to get married in the mayor's office, or in saying, we have a council chamber, and it has a huge crucifix in it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. That's another. I don't know why, but you cannot have a civil ceremony in that room because there's a crucifix in it. So, as of falling under we're under the umbrella of the religious umbrella. That even includes the humanists who aren't spiritual or religious, but that's the way the government can work at, either civil or religious.
Yes.
You have no restrictions, because you can have whatever religious iconography, whatever you want, because you are the celebrant and it's a religious one.
Oh,
now, we'll argue whether it's religious or not, neither here nor there, but spiritual religious. So you can do what you do. So in a Catholic church or in a Protestant church or Church of England, the minister is free, and the couple, to do whatever they do that is normal for their ceremonies. It's the same with us. So you are more restricted with civil ceremonies than you are with religious. So mine is not, it's a pagan religious ceremony. That's how it's defined. So there's loads of freedom.
Yeah, that's an interesting question that you brought up right there about, how do we define Druidry? Because the way I define it for myself, I don't define it as a religion. And where do you stand on that, Eimear, for yourself personally, aside from how the government categorises you?
I wouldn't define it as a religion because it doesn't have set dogma. It doesn't have a set of rules. It doesn't have a good book. That it's far too diffuse and for it to be termed a religion. So I would see a spiritual path, which is what I like. But I understand for bureaucratic reasons that to start getting into it, well, it's not exactly it is, but some people in the order might think it's a religion, others don't, that they just, even the humanists get swept under that religious umbrella. But it's a way of managing bureaucracy, I think, without actually getting into, is it really a religion?
Yeah, which incidentally, as you've mentioned humanism, I'm often at pains to point out to people that I'm not a humanist because I personally, perhaps you do too, offer my services to whoever might want them, and you're often kind of just automatically assumed to be a humanist, and it's actually a far more dogmatic position than any that I know that's taken by any Druid.
I don't know much about humanism. Just people assume that if it's not religious, it's humanist. If it has a ceremony, and I go, no, I'm not.
Because I when I first was looking into celebrant training, this would be way back in the about 2005 or something. I actually went and had a chat with the local humanists about their training, and it was when I discovered, if you train with us, as if you become a humanist celebrant, then you cannot have any kind of religious music. You can't have a prayer. You have to be very careful about what you include in your ceremonies. And no, that's not what I'm about at all. What my passion for this is just being able to offer people whatever feels right for them.
There's comments here about some people doing. This is your. I'm so attuned to watching the comments.
Yes. Don't worry.
Do this. But because for me, when I'm working with a couple or parents, for either baby naming, is what do you want? I give them a template. This is something we can work from. Now you are free to add. And then you get people from mixed traditions. You say, okay, do you want something from a Hindu tradition? And if people want something from a Christian tradition, I am easy. I don't get, as long as they recognize that if it's a legal ceremony, that on their wedding cert, it's going to be pagan. It's a pagan legal wedding cert.
Yeah.
But anyone can choose anything from it if it has meaning for them. And for me, that flexibility has to be there. For me as a celebrant, not for anybody else, but just for me. And I suppose that makes it what makes it more meaningful for the couple.
Absolutely. And I guess we've got slightly sidetracked into talking about the kind of official side of weddings, but what I really wanted to talk to you about was the magic of ceremony. And I guess you've already mentioned one of the most magical parts of all the weddings and hand fastings that we conduct, which is the bit that we don't write, the part that the couples say to each other. But can I ask you, Eimear, what do you think makes for a magical ceremony?
I think when it's got to do with if the couple are on the same side in terms of what they want, and that isn't always the case. So if both couples want it, and if they have a good connection with me, I think that makes a huge thing. And if they have a supportive family around them, because non-church or non-civil weddings are new. They're coming in, in the last maybe 10 years or whatever. So for many people, they don't know what to make of it. If you have a supportive, so a couple that are wanting both the same thing, and then they have a good relationship with me, then the three of us can work really, really well together. And then if they have supports, because I always have a ceremony in a circle if I can. And I get as many of their guests or family or friends to be involved in the ceremony. So it's not. So when I see a venue and they say we have the chairs all this way, and then the couple, you see two chairs with their backs
Yeah.
to the community, I go,
Yeah.
this is going to be really hard for me, because then everybody's a spectator. So then I introduce the idea of a circle, and that is
Yes.
to get everybody in. And I know myself, when I've been married within a circle, then you're having your ceremony in a cauldron of love, where you can see
Absolutely.
everybody around you, and hopefully that's the idea, is that everybody
Yeah.
who's invited is welcome and wants to be there, and they are just showering you with love and goodwill because they want this to be the beginning of a great life together. So having people involved, doing elemental blessings or readings, or getting so many people want hand fasting as well as doing the vows and the rings, and getting maybe key people in their lives to tie the cord, and to have as many people as involved. I also tell a story.
Oh yeah. And is the story that you tell the story of the couple?
It's the Angus Ogan care story.
Ah, okay.
So Angus Ogan is the Celtic god of love.
Would you be able to tell us a sort of micro version now?
Oh, okay.
Putting you right on the spot, sorry.
No, I can tell the story, but it can take you 10, 15 minutes. So you want a short version. It
Yeah.
essentially is Angus Ogan. So I'm not going to perform it. You're just going to get the skeleton, the bones.
Yeah.
So Angus Ogan is the Celtic god of love, and everybody loves him, and he lives with his mother, Boann, and his father, Andaya, in their home in Newgrange, Brún na Bóinne, and all is well in the land. And then a disease or some illness falls Angus, and all he can do is lie in bed. And he's getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and everybody's worried, and nobody can find a cure. Anyway, this druid comes along, a woman, and Boann asks her to go in and look at her son. And she says, straight away, you're suffering from unrequited love. You have that look. And he sits up, he said, that's exactly it. This woman comes to me in my dream, and she is so beautiful. And she smiles at me, and I reach out my hand to her, and as soon as I do, she disappears. And every night she comes and she haunts me in my sleep, and I can't live without her love. I need to meet her. I need to find her. So anyway, the druid says, well, I might know somebody who could tell us. So they head off on a journey down to Tipperary, and they meet Bove Jarrag, who's got his she there, and he says, yes. They tell him the story, and he describes the woman in his dreams, and he says, yes, that's Care, Iverve, Care Uberry. She has been condemned by a sorcerer because she refused his attentions to spend half her life as a swan and half her life as a woman. And she can be found at the Lake of the Dragon's Mouth, high up on the Galtee Mountains. So they head off at Samhain time, and he goes up with the druid and Bove Jarrag, and he's very, very weak. And eventually he sees these 7 swans come across the horizon, led by a silver chain, and the first one breaks away and comes down to him. And as she comes close to the water, the surface of the water, she turns into her human form, and there it is, Care, the woman in his dreams. And he reaches out his hand, and she pulls away, and she takes to the air again as a swan. This happens 3 times, but 3 times he says, Care, Care, come to me. And this is the key piece. I am dying for the want of your love. I will never own you. I will never possess you. I will never control you. I will accept you as you are, be you swan or be you woman. But I need you in my life. Please. And 3 times he says it. And the 3rd time she comes back, regains her human form, reaches out her hand to him and pulls him into the water, and they both become swans, and they take to the air, and they sing a love song. And for 3 days and 3 nights they're singing their love song around the island of Ireland, and everybody hears it, falls into a deep sleep, dreaming of love and peace and serenity and maturity and wholeness, etc. So the thing is, like, who among us does not want to be loved and accepted for who we really are? So that's the story I tell.
Oh, Eimear, even in your express micro bones, that was just so moving, and my eyes are welling up, and I can just imagine when you give that your full.
I do.
Yeah, when you give that story its full space, that must be absolutely magical. Yeah.
It's a beautiful story. Absolutely a beautiful story. Yeah.
Do you tend to tell the story of the couple themselves when you?
No,
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't. Do you?
Yes, I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, it's one of the things that it's one of the tasks in the Celebrating Life course as well that I kind of coax the students through.
I might think about that because I always think, God, I'm doing enough.
Yeah,
Because I suppose people do a lot of that at the wedding reception, you know, when they're telling the
yes,
stories off.
yeah,
That's something I might think about. Yeah, I
yeah.
hope.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to do a sort of story, you know, that I ask them about how they met,
Yeah,
and you
I
know, just
usually ask them that anyway,
yeah,
so I know.
yeah, and if there's a proposal, you know, especially if there has been, you know, a romantic proposal, it's always really lovely to do that. And yeah, I feel that it can help to sort of really bring that story, yeah, that history that the couple of it is, or sometimes the family have experienced together, you know, really into the presence in
Mhm.
the ceremony, make it very present for them just before they exchange their vows, and also to really, yeah, invite everyone else into the sort of intimacy of that story as well. Yeah, so that's, I guess, you know, answering my own question, one of the things that I feel can kind of really add to the magic of the ceremony. But I really wanted to ask you as well. Oh, look, Deborah's asking a question. Where's the most favourite place to perform a wedding? The environment, location, and background. I'll give you that one first, and then I'll ask my
Okay, well,
question.
I have 3 locations here in my house. I have a Norman tower, which is a ruined tower. And actually, I've discovered recently it's an anchorite cell. That's a temple we have that dedicated to Oncaliac, but it can be a place if people want to get married. And then I light up. It's dark, but loads and loads of night lights. Some couple wants that. Then we have a ruined chapel with a triskel in the middle of it, and that's another place that's dedicated to Danu and Lou. And then I have my Druid grove in the garden, so that's there. So that will be for non-legal weddings. And then generally legal weddings are held not on sacred sites because there's planning and all sorts of stuff. Like you can't have a legal wedding at Tara, for example. So, but it's usually in the grounds of a hotel and or of a building. That's where it is. It might be a ruined building or whatever, but it has to be a place that's open to the public. So, I've gone to different places. So, some hotels or some places have beautiful gardens, but I suppose you can't beat being out on a sacred site, but that is not for a legal one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I guess you've sort of brought me around to the next question I was going to ask as well, which is I just wanted to ask you, you know, in terms of what makes the magical ceremony, are most of the weddings that you perform, or it sounds like almost all the weddings that you perform, are they druidic ceremonies? Are they for druid and pagan couples?
That's what people want. So
Yes,
they look me up and I go, why do you want me, or why did you choose me? They say, look at your website. I know you're a druid. This is what we'd like.
yes,
And the interesting thing is, the first legal one I ever did was for my first cousin's daughter. I couldn't believe it. I was so chuffed that somebody from my family, because I come from a very respectable Roman Catholic family, and they were just so open to everything. I've done a baby naming since for their child, and their friends were a bit nervous, like, oh, what's this pagan thing? He says, trust me, it'll be fine. And people were just blown away. So people tend to enjoy them, even though they may not know what to expect. So I see people here saying that after listening to this, they want to get married again.
that's lovely, isn't it? That's great. Yeah. Um, yeah, and what do you how do you feel that your what how would you define the sort of magic of druidry? You know, what that sort of druidic element brings to the ceremony. I guess it's like maybe a harder question for you because all of the ceremonies that you conduct are in that realm, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking,
I think,
yeah,
okay, it's being in a circle. out in nature. If we can, I recommend outside. And we've done it in places, where it's horizontal rain until 2 minutes before it starts. And because the couple trust that the rain will stop, it does. And elemental blessing. So we bring in the element. So somebody, either I'll do it on my own, because sometimes I'll do it, just the couple only want that they'll turn up from America or Australia or wherever and say, it's just us two and we want to do this. Private, and I'll do that. And I'll go and teach the directions, I'll bring them a blessing. I think that has magic to it. And people love hand fasting in addition to the sharing of rings. There's something, even though, for some hand fasting is for a year and a day, others it's for forever. It's just different ways of using it. And people always love the Druids prayer, which is really interesting. Nobody has ever said, delete that bit. So I have a menu and they'll say, I don't like this, none of that, I like this. But nobody's ever said, leave that out.
Interesting. Yeah, the elemental blessing. I'm just thinking about that because as you know, that most of the ceremonies that I do aren't Druid or pagan. Because I offer my celebrancy, quite widely, and although I don't hide my connection and involvement with Druidry, it's not at the sort of forefront of my site that's out there. But I was asked to do a pagan funeral today, and I had that joy of doing, bringing in the blessings of the elements at the beginning of the ceremony, and there's just something quite profound that feels that it comes into the space when we have that opportunity to explicitly expand that circle, I guess, to the more than human realm.
Absolutely. And we had that for Howard when he passed in 2015. So we had a ceremony in our grove, and he's buried in the graveyard next door to the house. And we had, various people doing elemental blessings. And it was so most people, were Roman Catholic, Irish people who said we didn't know what we were coming to. Funerals that we know are in churches. And here was everything. The wake was here in this room here. He was laid out here just behind me. And they were blown away. And I have a priest friend of mine, a good friend of mine, he said, I was blown away by it. He rang me 2 days later. He said, I was saying mass this morning and I was telling the congregation about the funeral, and this is how it should be done, and it should not be left to priests. And that's what he said.
Wow, that is
so that, and then it was again in including as many, not just having chief mourners, but including as many people. So the space was there. Because I remember my stepson died in 2007. He was an echo warrior looking after the 9 ladies in Derbyshire, and he died suddenly. And so we had the ceremony in Scotland in a woodland burial place, and everybody who wanted to say something would leave an offering on the coffin. And people were so good, they left their dreadlocks, or they left potato cakes, or they left whiskey flasks or spoons. You'll need this, and it was just really, really moving. And people came out and said, he was my friend and I want to say this. And somebody else says, he was my friend. And it allowed everybody, in addition to the family, to do that. And I thought that was just so important, because sometimes friends are much closer to the deceased than maybe even family members, but family members get first dibs on everything. So it's, for me, and that's in our family, 2 family funerals, my stepson and my husband, to open that up to people.
That participation, whatever way it is that we can find of opening our ceremonies up for everyone to participate. And I think that's one of the things that makes it, that, when I think about all the feedback that I have from different ceremonies I do, it's people saying that they felt involved and they felt like they were part of it. And you hit the nail so on the head when you said, fundamental to that is right at the beginning, that just that fact that you're facing each other, even if it's not in a circle as such. A lot of my wedding
circles, square circles, yes.
Yes, exactly. But just the fact that people are facing each other, I'm going to pick up on some of these questions coming in from people joining us. So Hannah's asking, how does this all work if one's a pagan and the other not? Does it still have the same magical feel? Is that something you've come across?
I think
Eimear?
if both people are open to the other, I've had friends who one is pagan, one isn't, and it's like it's either one or the other, and there can't be a meeting, and one gives in to the other, which is not a fair compromise in some way. I think if they can both recognize the value in each other's, and if they're not wedded to it, has to be in a church, it has to be this way or that way. I think it can absolutely. I mean, when we had our lunacy ceremony here on Sunday, and I'm also a priestess in the Fellowship of Vices, so it's our ceremonies are druidic, but we process and we invoke deities, Isis, and so it's kind of theistic and animistic woven in. And I always leave the space open for people to invoke from any tradition. They don't have to be a priest, priestess. They don't have to be a druid. I say this is open. So sometimes we have some Hindus and they will invoke Hindu deities, or somebody else, a Christian. I'm open to that. And I think if the couple, they need to be able to, somewhere as a couple, I think, to be able to accommodate the other's values.
Yes.
Otherwise it's going to be, and if there's that open, that, I mean, ecumenical only applies to Christian religions, but if you can have that openness to the other, I think it can be just as magical, as long as you're not fighting and dying on the wrong hill over a thing.
Yeah. I'd like to sort of chip in on that one as well, because it's my kind of meat and bread of celebrancy in a way that it's one of the things that I particularly love doing is working with couples where they have different angles on things, and I do tend to, for weddings, get people who are at least interested in some kind of earth-based spirituality, even if they're not full-on pagan, and I quite often get people who will sort of place themselves at different points along what I've grown used to talking of as the tree hugger scale, which I think I've spoken about in these broadcasts before. I think everybody probably knows what I mean by that. And my feeling on it really is that that kind of magic that we connect to is beyond all the definitions that we put on it. So for me, the art of celebrancy, especially when we're working with people from different kinds of backgrounds, it's just about finding the right language that feels really natural and real and relevant and inclusive for the people that are at the heart of the ceremony, and also for all their guests. And what we're in, as long as the intent of what we're creating and what we're doing and what we're celebrating, and also around what we're inviting to hold that celebration, is shared, it doesn't really matter if people have got sort of different understandings and different nuances, different beliefs around that. It's the intent that's at the heart of it, I feel.
And that story that I tell
Mm.
is around that. You have got somebody who's a swan and who's human, and they're very, very different. And being able to meet each other in others or in the other space in some way, I think it is very, very important. And that desire to weave something that creates the two. And again, I think if the couple are on the same page fundamentally, then they have, different ways. If they're so fundamentalist in their spiritual beliefs, it's going to be very, very difficult. But if they're more open and embracing of the other and accepting of the other, then it can be as magical as anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on to Deb's question now, which was about on a funeral front, which Debs calls farewells. Can you tell us what was a great ceremony or one of your best ceremonies, and why?
Well, that was Howard's. I mean, the only funeral I've done. I mean, Howard and I developed it, and then we got Koch Brannigan, who's a member of the Order, and Paul. You know Paul Corcoran.
Yes.
They were the two Druids who were the heralds, as it were. that was, and I know from people, the feedback afterwards was just, people were blown away. It was the 14th of April and the sun was splitting the rocks. And like I said, we did this elemental blessing, involved people. I did the eulogy and his two brothers were there. And then we started telling stories, or they started telling stories about him, which was lovely. There was a lot of laughter. And then we processed from the garden in through a temple out into the graveyard, and we had somebody singing a psalm that Howard had asked with a shruti box, and people chanted as he went into the ground, and then everybody filled in the grave, and we all stayed around. And people afterwards said, I didn't know anyone, but this, you know, that it was a song I got from a chant from JJ, "Deep into the earth I go, hold my hand, brother, sister." So people started doing this, and they said, I didn't know these people, but I held their hands. This was pure magic. And there were many people who did not know each other, and the weather was with us. And when I was reciting one of my favorite poems of Howard's at the graveside, this hoverfly came up. I had already been telling people that Howard was an expert, a little nerd when he was 14 on hoverflies. And he did an interview for the BBC when he was 14 on hoverflies. And he was known as Hoverfly Howard. So I'm reading the poem, and this hoverfly is here, and everybody said, there's Howard. It was just, so that was a really, really beautiful one. I suppose it's because it was exactly what Howard and I had discussed this.
Yeah.
Exactly as he wanted it.
And
we were able to do that for him. And that was really, really important. We waked him here for 5 days and then had the ceremony. And normally it's done in 3 days. You're very lucky in the UK. You have that, you have time to prepare.
Yeah.
Where I don't think I could set up as a funeral celebrant unless I was full time, because I do other things. That, you know, if somebody dies today, the funeral will have to be in 2 days' time. That's what happens, where you have a few weeks to prepare and to discuss and all of that. So anyway, that's just my one. I don't know what your best one was.
Well, the one that springs to mind actually is one that I did a couple of years ago, and it was also for somebody that had been very, very much involved in the planning of her own funeral. She was an amazing, wonderful, incredible, beautiful young woman who had been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer, and actually had been introduced to me by a friend of hers who's a fellow member of OBOD, Kirsten. I don't know if you know her, but and yeah, she ended up you know, far exceeding any kind of prognosis that she'd been given. But she didn't define herself necessarily as a druid or a pagan or anything, but really at the heart of what she wanted was to celebrate her connection with nature, her deep spiritual connection with nature, and what that meant to her. And it was just so powerful because she was so present in everything that happened, you know. And I thinking not just about the ceremony, but especially about the sort of celebration that came afterwards, and you know how she wanted that to be. And yeah, that's very similar to what you were saying about Howard, you know, that you had planned it together, and I think that does bring a really extraordinary kind of dimension to things when somebody has expressed what they want, and then when the people left behind have that guidance and that comfort of knowing that they're carrying out somebody's wishes, and then everybody present just has that feeling that they are taking part in a ceremony that is being partly held in some way by the person who's deceased. Does that make sense?
I think it's so important to, and this is for all of us, you know, when we're well, to be talking about what we want in terms of funerals. I've been around where someone dies suddenly and maybe they haven't been practicing in the religion in which they were brought up, and people don't know what to do. And it just puts huge stress on. And then there's the kind of, like when William, my stepson, died, what does he want? You know, will we bury him in Derbyshire? We took time to discuss it. And I think he'd have been pleased. And then we had a 3 months mind. In Ireland, you have a month's mind. There's a mass a month after the person has died to remember them. And it's an Irish thing. I don't know if it's Catholic elsewhere, but certainly is Irish. Anyway, we had one. We went back 3 months later to Scotland, and it was lovely, and people turned up, and we sang, and it was just beautiful, but it's that, I think, having talked about it and not being afraid to talk about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And when if you've done it, if you've spoken about it when you're well, it's much easier to talk about it when you're not. Much easier. From the time we met, Howard and I had always talked about our deaths and our funerals. Now it changed form because, over the 18.5 years we've been together, we hadn't been Druids when we met. It evolved, but the fact that we were never afraid to go there, that just made it so much easier. A few days before my father died, well, a few days before he became unconscious, before he died, he spoke to my mother and he said, I want to be buried in such and such a bit. This is one. Now he's Catholic, so the mass is going to be straightforward, but this is where I want to be buried. And that helped.
Yeah.
It made it easier, and then some people say, well, it's not important it doesn't matter what the dead person wants. It's the people left behind. And I always go, no, it's a dance between the two, assuming that the dead person is reasonable in their requests.
Yeah.
But I think we have to honor what they would like to.
And that's why our course is called Serving the Living and the Dead, so that absolutely to reflect that dance.
Absolutely.
I'm going to pick up upon Andrew's question, which is, do you stay in touch with people that you marry, offering a kind of aftercare, for example, if they hit a stumbling block in the relationship? Is that something you've ever become involved with, Eimear?
I've never offered it, but couples do stay in touch. I had one lovely couple. Oh, I can't remember any years. Howard and I did their hand fasting, and then it was they would send me occasionally, and then they'd let me know when they had a baby and things like that. And then for the bride's 40th, the groom had contacted me and said, can we have a surprise Zoom session for her birthday and with their little girl? And we did that. So I haven't been asked for that. So, but I do people still keep in touch. Yes. And, let me know if they've had a child or whatever, which is really, really nice. But I haven't, I've never offered it. I've never been sure, this is an interesting one, somebody comes to marry. Do you say, well, do I check and are they a suitable couple to get married? I don't see that as my role. I could do that as a psychologist if they came to me as a couple for counseling. That's not what I am. I have to take on board that these are mature people who are making this decision. There was once I had a doubt about a couple, and 3 times I asked them at the ceremony. I used the sword of justice. I got this from the Obad one. And 3 times I said, do you swear to keep your vows sacred? Now, they're still married. So generally, I get a good feeling about the couple. And then sometimes a couple will cancel just before and say, we've hit a stumbling block and we can't go ahead until we've sorted this out. But they haven't asked me for help, and nor did I offer it. It wouldn't be my role. So it's an interesting one. What do you do?
Well, I looked at that question and I thought, to me, that question kind of points a little bit at what I consider to be the difference between priesthood and celebrancy. And I think perhaps that role of being somebody that is turned to for advice, within the community, kind of fits with the idea of what I think of as a priesthood. And I feel that the role of celebrant is somewhat different.
Of minister, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel, of minister, maybe that's a better way of putting it. But I remember speaking with Philip Cargom about this when we were first setting up the courses and the OBOD training courses for celebrants. And that kind of fundamental difference between a priesthood, that we might think of as being traditionally people that have a particular role of being perhaps an authority, in the community, or an authority, on marriage, or an authority on spiritual life, or whatever it may be. And celebrant doesn't carry any of that. It's much more of a role of service and facilitation in my view. So yeah.
Because I know if I wanted a celebrant to do a wedding for me personally, and then they were checking me out about my relationship and how mature my decision was, it would jar with me. I'd say, that is not your role.
Yeah.
And you have to trust that I'm able to do this for myself. And I do, because I remember I've been married twice, okay? But we, in a Catholic church the first time, when we had to go and do a pre-marriage course with the Catholic, it was then the Catholic Marriage Advisory Council or something. But first I went to a priest and he was talking to us. Now, he was very hands-off, but I've had other friends who've gone to priests who've been told what to do as a couple. And it's like, how do you know? You've never experienced that. And I mean, if I was going to a couple counselor, I'd need to know that they have actually had a relationship.
Yes.
So I just think it's a bit sometimes rich about thinking you can offer guidance to somebody. Now, if I do couple counseling. So if a couple did actually contact me afterwards and said, we're having trouble, could we have a consultation with you? I'd be happy to do that. It's not something I offer because I'm not going to suggest or assume or program them. By the way, when things go pear-shaped, you can come back to me. Yeah. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. If it happened that anyone did want, yes, I would offer that because that's part of my role as a psychologist. Yeah. But I would, yeah. I'm glad. Yes, I see the difference between being the priestly role, the ministry role, and the celebrancy role.
Yeah. I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll be kind of coming towards our time. But Hannah's asking, how do you cope emotionally yourselves with funerals? Is it a drain? Do you get upset? Have you done many funerals since doing your training?
I haven't, no. But I've been with people who died. Weddings can be draining.
Yeah.
I can come back high from a ceremony, because it's been really great. And then once I get home, it's like crash because the holding of space can take up a lot of energy. I've cried at weddings. I remember doing one for 2 members of the order, actually, here in Three Castles, and 2 men, and every one of us was crying. That was lovely. But with funerals, I didn't cry at Howard's funeral. I used to be a nurse, and I've been with people, and I work with people who are bereaved. And if I cry, I cry. I mean, tears will come. I won't go boohoo weeping so that somebody has to remind me. And I've seen when my father was dying, I saw nurses crying, and I was really moved that they cared enough about him that they would cry. I didn't think it was unprofessional. I always thought it would be. So I always hid my tears as a nurse when I was a student, and then I saw them doing it. I thought, oh, they really care about him. Oh my goodness. Now I know it's okay to cry, to be seen, to be moved.
Yes.
And it depends on, I suppose, the nature of the death and, the circumstances. Some funerals Howard's was a very joyful one. Some are very, very sad. So it all depends. But I think all ceremonies take energy.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you obviously do way more funerals?
I do lots of funerals, and actually, when you were talking about that, the nurse crying and the being seen to show emotion, I had that experience just today, actually, going to see a family about the funeral of their son, and I said, please excuse me if I show emotion, while I'm speaking to you now. Please be assured I'll hold things together as your celebrant, and they positively gave me that feedback that they appreciated the fact that I that I was with them in their emotion. And to answer Hannah's question, I think if you are doing if you do go into doing funerals and you do lots, I think it is something that I have gradually kind of learned to deal with, better and better, with experience, and learning how to I guess have a process. And again, coming back to how this is taught on the courses, that you might recall, Eimear, the very first homework of that course was about writing our celebrant's prayer, which was not a prayer that we use in our ceremonies, but our prayer that we used for ourselves to call in that support, call in what holds us in order that we can hold those situations that we're being asked to hold, so that we can feel held in order to hold, or that we're holding with and on behalf of, or that we're acting in service of something greater than ourselves. And I think
so as a psychologist, I have a supervisor, so a psychotherapist. We always have that other person to go to talk about how it affects us. And I don't know if you have somebody, another celebrant that you can talk to, particularly about funerals, to somebody that you can debrief with if you need it.
Yeah, and that's something that was added to the course since you did it, actually, Eimear, when we developed it further in lesson 6 now. My supervisor, who's a counsellor and therapist, actually joins me for one of the film chats, to talk about, what the importance of that role, and that was tremendously helpful to me. And also, so something that I talked with her about doing as well. I now, almost as a sort of standard, as a standard part of all my feedback to every student that does the courses, when I give that feedback on their prayer, which is usually just to say what a privilege it is to have read it, and I always suggest to also develop a prayer of grounding and thanksgiving and letting go after we complete each service, so it's part of being able to really kind of give your all to this work of funeral celebrancy for me is understanding that it's a finite role. And I think when I started out, I really wanted to be able to make things better, and we've just, when your heart's in it, you want to be able to make everything better, and you can't. All you can do is do that work of celebrancy to the very best of your ability and the best that your heart can give, and then to place that family and those people back in the care of all that is and all that was and all that will be, and every other loving power and force and influence that can hold them. And that's one of the things that really helps me. I know there are lots more questions, but I feel that it's, I try and keep these broadcasts to under an hour, so
you're very disciplined.
It's lovely. I love your long form chats as well, but so I just want to really thank everyone for their participation, and perhaps I will try and come back in and to the chat later and respond to some of the other questions that we haven't talked about here this evening, and perhaps you might feel inclined to do that as well, Eimear, but there's obviously no onus on you to do that at all. Very grateful to you for giving your time and your energy and your warmth and your wisdom, sharing that with us this evening. We didn't get to speak before this chat because you were away at camp, and usually I just kind of slightly dropped that ball amidst all the hecticness, so didn't talk to you recently. So we met very briefly before going live. So I'm kind of springing this on you a little bit, Eimear, but I usually like to complete these broadcasts just with a little moment to draw everyone together. Perhaps a little reading or a blessing. Could I ask you to give us a little lunar blessing?
I thought you were going. I thought you were going to do something like this. So what I have is a lorica. I read it out at it's one of these favorite ones I have at the celebration of the confirmation of the installation, if that's okay. Why I like this one is it's a Christian breastplate or a prayer of protection, believed to have been adapted from a Druid spell of protection. So, I call upon the 7 daughters of the sea, who shape the threads of long life. 3 deaths be taken from me, 3 lives be given to me. 7 waves of plenty poured from me. May ghosts not injure me on my journey, in my radiant breastplate without stain. May my name not be pledged in vain. May death not come to me until I'm old. I call upon my silver champion, who has not died and will not die. May time be granted to me of the quality of bronze. May my form be exalted. May my law be ennobled. May my strength be increased. May my tomb not be readied. May I not die on my journey. May my return be ensured to me. May the 2-headed serpent not attack me, nor the hard grey worm, nor the senseless beetle. May no thief attack me, nor a company of women, nor a company of warriors. May I have increase of time from the King of all. I call upon Shenach of the 7 lives, whom fairy women suckled on the breasts of good fortune. May my 7 candles not be quenched. I am an invisible fortress. I am an unshakable cliff. I am a precious stone. I am the symbol of 7 riches. May I be the woman or man of hundreds of possessions, hundreds of years, each 100 after another. I summon my good fortune to me. May the grace of spirit be upon me. Sinead.
Oh, thank you so much, Eimear. That was beautiful. Would you post that in the chat, please? The reference for it.
Well, can I?
If no, either now or at a later point, that would be wonderful. Yeah, that would
actually,
be
it's going to be, if anyone, I don't know if it's just OBOD members or the whole world, as my daughter used to say, the whole wild word. Yeah. I think in this month's touchstone as well, that prayer. So I can put it in. Yeah. Okay.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so very much for joining us, Eimear.
And for asking me to be here. I really enjoyed the chat.
And I feel like we've just scratched the surface. So yeah, perhaps you would come back again sometime in the future to continue the conversation. And thank you everybody far and wide for joining us. It's lovely to see our regular watchers, listeners, regular compatriots, and also others who joined us this evening too. And wherever you are in the world,
I recognize many of the names.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, our warmest wishes and bright blessings to all of you.
Anna Clean, Lunasa, Jeev Golair. Blessings, or Lunas if we wash Jeev. May you have a prosperous harvest.
Wonderful. Thank you.